All right, today we are diving into one of the heaviest hitters in the entire history of philosophy, Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Now, I know it has a reputation for being, well, impossible to read. But trust me, at its core, it's all about a revolutionary answer to one of philosophy's biggest and oldest questions.
And that question is pretty simple, but it's a real mind-bender. Do you see the world as it actually is? Or is everything you experience kind of filtered and built by your own mind? This is the huge philosophical mystery that Kant decided he was going to solve.
So, before Kant showed up, philosophy was kind of stuck. You had these two teams, and they were in a total deadlock. On one side, you had the rationalists. They were all about logic and pure reason. They'd say, true knowledge comes from the mind alone, like geometry or math. But on the other side, you had the empiricists. And they said, no way. All knowledge has to come from our senses, from what we actually see and touch and hear. It was a real philosophical standoff.
And then Kant comes in and drops this absolute gem. He says, thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. What he's saying is, hey, you're both right and you're both wrong. Reason all by itself is just empty logic. It's not about anything. But our senses, what he calls intuitions, that's just a flood of raw, chaotic data. It's meaningless until our mind gives it some shape. You absolutely need both working together.
And this is where we get to his big, game-changing idea. Kant says your mind isn't just sitting there like a passive mirror, just reflecting whatever the world throws at it. Oh no, he says your mind is an active builder. It's like a construction worker, taking the raw materials from your senses and actively building the reality that you experience.
So how does it do that? Well, Kant says the mind comes with a kind of pre-installed operating system. And the two most basic pieces of this software are space and time. Now get this, Kant argues that space and time aren't actually out there in the world. They're not containers that the universe sits in. Instead, they are the fundamental lenses of our mind. They are the framework that our brain forces us to see everything through. We can't experience anything except in space and in time.
And that's exactly what he means by pure reason. He's not talking about solving Sudoku puzzles. He's investigating what the mind itself brings to the table before it has a single experience of the world. It's the mind's own built-in rules. And when he says critique, he doesn't mean he's criticizing it. He means he's doing a deep, careful investigation, trying to map out what the mind is capable of and, just as important, what its absolute limits are.
But it's not just about the lenses of space and time. That's only the first step. Once all that sensory information comes pouring through those lenses, your mind has another set of tools ready to go, to organize it all and turn it into something that makes sense.
He called these tools the categories. You can think of them like the mind's built-in filing system, and they include some really fundamental concepts like causality, cause and effect, or ideas like unity, that something is one single thing, and substance, the idea that things have underlying properties. The key is we don't learn these ideas from the world. They are the rules the mind uses to understand the world in the first place.
Let's take cause and effect. This is a brilliant example. You don't actually see causality. You just see one thing happen. A bright flash of lightning. Then, a few seconds later, you hear another thing happen, a loud boom of thunder. It's your mind using its built-in causality category that automatically forges the link and says, aha, the lightning caused the thunder. That connection isn't something you observed. It's something your mind created. Okay, so let's just pause here for a second. If our mind is this busy construction worker, using its own blueprints like space, time, and causality to build our reality, then that raises a massive question. What are we actually seeing? What is the world like before our mind gets to work on it?
And this, right here, is the absolute climax of Kant's argument. He says we have to make a huge distinction. On the one hand, you have the phenomenon. That's the world as it appears to us, the reality that has been shaped and structured by our minds. This world, he says, is totally and completely knowable. But, on the other hand, you have the noumenon. That's the world as it really is in itself, completely raw and independent of our minds. And here's the kicker. Kant's mind-blowing conclusion is that the noumenal world is forever and completely unknowable to us. We can never get there.
Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a total downer. But Kant saw this as a massive win. Why? Because since we all share the same fundamental mental operating system, we can have real, objective, certain knowledge about the phenomenal world, the world we all experience. This is why science and math work.
They are just exploring the consistent rules, like causality, that all of our minds impose on reality.
But, and this is a really big but, Kant was also crystal clear about the flip side. We can never have certain knowledge about things that are beyond any possible experience. Things like God, or an immortal soul, or the universe as a complete whole. Why not? Well, because these ideas can't come through our senses. Our mind's tools, space, time, causality, have no raw material to work on. So for Kant, reason can think about these things, but it can never truly know them.
So what was the point of all this? What was his game plan? Well, he had a couple of major goals. First, he wanted to put science on a rock-solid foundation, to show that its laws are basically rooted in how our minds have to work. At the same time, he wanted to put a hard limit on metaphysics, to stop philosophers from making these wild claims about the nature of ultimate reality that they could never, ever prove. He was basically drawing a line in the sand for human knowledge.
So, when you boil it all down, here's the takeaway. Kant gives us a world we can be certain about. We can absolutely trust science, we can trust math, they're reliable. But he also calls for a kind of intellectual humility. We have to be honest about the limits of our own minds and accept that some of the universe's biggest questions might be things we just can't answer.
And so that's where we'll leave it, with one last big thought to chew on. If Kant is right, if your own mind is actively constructing the reality you perceive every single moment of every single day, what in the world is reality anyway?